Hi, this is Kristen,
And this is Sydney.
and we're going to talk about some organizational challenges with my internship and hers. Mine is with Baden Street Settlement.
And mine's with Rise Collaborative.
Mhm.
Okay.
So, a little bit more about Baden Street. Their vision is services are designed, coordinated, and delivered with attention to neighborhood needs. All residents of the neighborhood have efficient and effective services available to them with I think that word is considerate, my screen is blocking it, and empathy. The quality of life is enhanced for individuals and families through participation in agency programs and activities. Program impact is regularly reviewed and assured continuous improvement. And their mission is to improve the quality of life for families, adults, and children, pursue the elimination of causes of poverty, and reduce the negative social problems associated with being poor and disadvantaged. And then some of their services that they offer are child development centers, the Attain Lab and the Digital Arts Lab, which are like computer-based programs for their customers, the Counseling and Support Center that works with substance abuse and addictions, the Emergency and Family Assistance Program that provides emergency funding to families to pay rent, buy groceries, pretty much anything like that. There's the Mature Adult Resource Center, and then the Metro Council for Teen Potential that works with teenagers and provides them with a safe place to go and ask questions or just hang out. The Behavioral Health and Community Center that is for people with disabilities and also adults dealing with mental health issues. And then there are a bunch of after-school programs for kids, including summer enrichment programs and Project Base that's inclusive for kids with and without disabilities. And then there's the clothing room that provides clothing and small household items for their customers.
Sorry. So my internship is with Rise Collaborative, which is a small group. It's a local Buffalo media group. The vision of Rise was just to create content that's designed by people from Western New York for people in Western New York, because the idea was pretty much most of the content that we have access to is from bigger cities, particularly for us since we're kind of overshadowed by New York. So this was to create content for people from Western New York, from Central New York, that sort of thing. So their mission is to represent small Buffalo-based businesses and organizations, as well as just local people. And they try to highlight people who are doing good in the community, whether it's community service or outreach, or they're just providing local merchandise for people who live in the area. And so their ultimate goal is really to just make the people of Buffalo and Rochester feel represented and raise awareness of what's great about our city through covering of events and other news going on. It's just lagging. Nope, see, it always does this. So what is Rise? A lot of people ask me this question when I tell them that I'm interning with Rise. It's a media group. They put out all sorts of content, whether it's articles and blogs, profiles. They do a physical magazine, which is called No Boundaries, and that comes out twice a year. A weekly email newsletter that promotes upcoming events in the local area, different highlights of restaurants and attractions, podcasts. They provide news, local news, as well as culture and lifestyle coverage.
So both of our internships, we've noticed that they have some critical problems in their respective organizations. So for Baden Street, I think that their biggest critical problem is a lack of funding and donation. And the reason for this problem that I've noticed, I think, is because of their size and their reach. They're a very small nonprofit that's just based in Rochester. And they don't reach that many people outside of like the community that they actually work with. Their Facebook is really their only social media, and it's only has like 500 people liking the page, and their like posts don't really get much engagement at all. So the impact of this problem is that they have less funding for each program, and as you saw, like there's a ton of programs, so they need a lot of funding, and they're not able to renovate buildings or update any of like the parking lots. They can't buy new like printers, copiers, and computers. So just doing day-to-day operations is becoming more difficult for them. And they have to rely on interns like me and the other intern, Daniela, that I'm working with, or volunteers that work with like the children or other departments. But for a lot of their departments, it's hard to have volunteers because of the topics that they help people with. And so some actions that I've noticed them taking would be kind of what I was brought in to do as an intern, which is working on new marketing initiatives. And also when I interviewed with my supervisor, we talked about how they want to grow their Facebook in order to reach more people. So they've kind of been building more brand awareness on Facebook by planning out more social posts. So that's what they've started to do.
And then Rise actually is facing a very similar challenge. Even though there's such different organizations that do different things, they're basically dealing with a lot of the same issues right now. So a big one for Rise is just the general lack of funding. It's still a pretty new problem since since we've just really been struggling since the start of COVID. We've been struggling trying to get advertising revenue from small business since we're so reliant on small businesses, which are, of course, struggling themselves. It's a manageable issue right now, and we're actually getting back on track, but it could impact growth down the line because if we don't start to see sort of profits coming soon, and you'll see as I talk about impacts, we'll talk about their inability to grow the brand because they just simply don't have the budget to pay new hires, which is why, like Kristen said, this organization as well is really reliant on internships. So before me, there was another intern who's actually staying on to sort of work with us because they don't have the capacity and the ability right now to hire new people. Not as much flexibility in projects being taken on. That basically just means that when we're offered a job, it's not really up to us if we can say, yes, we want to do this, or no, we don't, because we need the profits. And then it's also just kind of a struggle to compete with similar organizations because there are a couple other groups that we sort of keep in our peripheral vision. Buffalo Rising is one of them, and Buffalo Spree is another that kind of have the same vision as we do. So they're a little bit bigger and they get a little bit more from ad revenue and just people subscribing to them. So because of that, we're kind of falling under the radar. So what we've been doing is seeking out new advertisers because, like I said, we're very reliant on ad revenue. And something that I've been talking to my supervisor a lot about is collaborating with other organizations, not necessarily those that are doing similar things as us, but coming up, something that I'm working on in my internship is working with a little event called Buffalo Playground that we're actually the media sponsor for. So that's going to get us a little bit more like traction and a little bit more word of mouth going.
So moving on to some possible actions. These were actions that we thought that both Rise and Baden could probably benefit from. So the first idea that we had were to hold more fundraising events to open to the public. And that was a tip that we actually found on the website nonprofit.org. There were a lot of really good ideas, but fundraising events kind of got both of our attention because I know at least at Baden, we already do hold a fundraiser event. It's a gala, but because of COVID, it got moved and postponed. But they have had other smaller events that they could have done more fundraising with throughout this. They had a small graduation ceremony for their children's program that could have been turned into a fundraiser. And I think they are missing a couple other fundraisers throughout the year before the big gala, obviously when Corona is not around. And another idea that we had was for them to create more brand awareness, which I think we both have mentioned. With Baden, I know like Facebook is big, and then with Rise, as Sydney mentioned, being like the media sponsor and having all those different opportunities would help with that.
So next we kind of looked at the gaps in the actions that we were looking into taking. And for this, we kind of just took sort of like a question approach. So sort of like the big overarching questions that we saw and the problems that we saw with these actions was it really all goes back to just the lack of funding in the first place. So our first question is just how do you plan an event without spending more than what you make in donations? Because Of course, to plan an event, you need to pay for a venue, for food, for entertainment, for whatever you want going on there. And it's okay to spend money as long as you're bringing in more than you spend. So that's definitely something that could be a little tricky. And then the other question that we had was just how do we create brand awareness without spending money on advertising? So it's really similar in nature. Obviously, as Kristen said, a lot of focus right now is on social media because that's sort of free marketing. But then once you're in there, you have to focus on how do you get your message out there without having to pay to promote your posts and making sure that everybody's seeing these. So these are definitely things we have to keep in consideration.
And then some other obstacles that we thought of were if we were able to actually get an event going, and getting people like to sponsor to get donations. As we mentioned, they're expensive, so you don't want to spend as much as you actually make in donations. So finding additional donors to help out with the event while also like getting people to donate at the event can be challenging. And then the obvious right now is the COVID pandemic. Events are getting canceled. We're not exactly sure when big events are going to be able to take place, so it's hard to actually plan for things right now.
And then just unintended negative consequences. We have to look at both sides of the spectrum as what could go wrong should we take these sorts of actions. As we've been saying for pretty much this whole slide, something we have to keep in mind is making sure that we don't spend more money than we make at fundraisers and events like that. And then the second thing is overexposure of brand. So basically, from a social media standpoint, you don't want your message out there too much because then people are going to see it. They're going to see, oh, that's just an ad. They're going to scroll past it and they're going to get really sick of you. And your message is getting out there, but not necessarily being understood and retained by the public. And it's just sort of being inundated with content that they aren't necessarily connecting with.
And then a key lesson. So we looked at the website Investopedia. So one of the things that was really big on that was you have to be able to spend money on things like advertising and events in order to spread your message, but you need to control how much you spend and you need to stick to a budget. So this is really important when planning events, keeping track of everything you're spending. Don't spend too much, but make sure you spend enough that the event is worth it for people to actually donate. That's a big part of budgeting. And then another key lesson we found was with smaller organizations or nonprofits, budgets are really tight. So you need to be more creative when you're thinking of solutions to problems. So think about other ways to get most out of your money or to get, something for cheaper, whatever.
So now we're just going to talk a little bit about what our role is as interns when it comes to implementing these actions and or just coming up with these ideas. So one of the reasons that Kristen and I decided to partner up is that we have a similar background. We're both communication and marketing students. So because of that, we've sort of noticed these similarities that we've been talking about in the challenges our organizations faced. And because of our education, we both are well equipped to use tools like social media, online analytics, and just to sort of monitor brand recognition and awareness using those tools. And we know how to then take the analytics and use them to create online content that's specifically for our audience, our target audience, and the goals that we want to reach so that our messages can be as powerful and as successful as possible.
And again, as communication and marketing students, we've taken a class called Campaign Strategy. And in that, we had to propose a full event as a campaign. And we learned about all the fundraising initiatives for nonprofits and small organizations, which is what we're working with right now. We learned how to create different themes for these events, how to actually advertise for your event. And we had to work with a budget. We had to work with another company. And so we've gone through this whole process before of just proposing an event and sticking to a budget and having an end goal of fundraising or raising money for a certain organization.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, going back to our curriculum, we have design skills from that sort of allows us to see things from a more visual perspective and make sure that any messages and any branding that actually gets put out, whether we're creating it or we're just looking it over, making sure that that's going to be the most effective and it's going to stand out and it's really going to be remembered. So if we're promoting the brand, if we're promoting an event, if we're just sort of putting content out there to get word out and name out, then we know that that's going to stand out among all of the content that, as I said previously, is just being shoved in everyone's faces every day. So, and that's it. So we did a little bit of research, and we, of course, have content within this presentation that just comes straight from our supervisors at Baden and Rise.
Thank you.
Thank you.